How do you anticipate that being received by the House?
Well, hopefully, I think there's, if you talk to appropriations, I think they're very concerned to make sure that we restore funding and levels in education and human services. And keep in mind, if you saw the programs that we identified here, these are home-delivered meals for seniors. This is the Garden Advocacy Commission. These are areas that we may have legal concerns. Forget the fact that it was considered to be an add-on. The BH consent decree and the Department of Children and Family Services requires us to fund these programs within DCFS. So I think it's very important that House members, and they recognize it, that we need to move forward. We need to make sure that we get those bills passed so we can provide funding for these programs.
Well, you say forget the fact that it was an add-on, but do you expect the House to really forget that right now?
Well, I think part of it. I think reasonable minds are going to prevail on this, and I have to believe that. And the fact is, and I get back to this issue, even with these components that we're focusing on, the funding for education, human services, this is still at the end of the day a $2.3 billion cut to the state budget. Never before in the history of the state of Illinois do I believe that we've ever cut the state of Illinois' budget by $2.3 billion off the governor's projected introduced budget.
Well, if they're going to stomach that $430 million, as they call it, an add-on, you say that part of that funding is required. Are you basically saying that they're going to have to cut from somewhere else, or they're just going to have to accept your figure, or those are the two options?
We're hopeful that they're going to accept the figure. The reality is, keep in mind here, this is a $700 million cut over and above over our introduced revenue number. I mean, any kind of projected revenues we get in from the COGV estimate, will go towards these programs. So we expect to see, this is an exceedingly conservative revenue estimate, we expect to see the revenue necessary to fund these programs.
How involved has the governor been from the beginning in terms of your appropriations hearings?
We've been in communication, ongoing communication with this team. Well, they showed up at the hearings. They participated. I mean, the fact is, let's be clear about this. The governor introduces a budget. Then it's our job to make the necessary steps to appropriate the money. And the governor's been part of the discussion process, as well he should. So,
what are some of those required programs that you mentioned?
Department of Children and Family Services, very, very important. The Guardians Advocacy Commission. I think that's a very, very important program. MAP is also, you can call that a requirement, because all of these students have received letters across the state of Illinois saying that they've received their MAP grants. So cutting it by $17 million is just not tenable, because it hurts the credibility of the universities, whether private or public, and it also hurts the capacity of these students to go to school in an affordable way.
Is there $430 million of required programs that you're talking about right now that wasn't in there before? Is that what this addresses? Or
part of this is the required, but the other part of it just reflects what we think is very important values and very important programs to fund.
How much of it is required of the $430 million?
I don't have that figure for you right now at this number. I mean,
is it more than half?
I would say I'd get back to you on that. But I mean, the reality is, if you look at the priority numbers that we looked at, it's a combination of those elements. It's DCFS, it's Guardians Advocacy Commission, it's education, right? It's human services. It's this looks at these programs that keeps, stabilizes the budget, makes significant cuts and meaningful cuts, while also making sure we protect people who are the most vulnerable in our state.
How important is restoring that funding to getting the votes necessary to pass the budget? Will they pass without that extra $430 million?
That's an excellent question. I think it's very important for people within our own caucus to know that we're making a commitment to fund these programs. And that's what we've been doing over this period of time. You've seen our budget that we've introduced. I think it's very, very important for members within our caucus, because they want to see both a balance of fiscal, stability, making necessary cuts while addressing these essential human services. So I think it's very, very important.
Senator, can you remind me of some of the nitty-gritty details of this? If the amendment is concurred in the House, you're working on an expenditure estimate of about $33.6. What's the revenue estimate that you're working on right now? That you're working off of? How much do you think the state's going to pull in?
Well, the revenue estimate we're working on is the same number we've worked. It's not our revenue number. Let's be clear on this. The revenue number is the Commission on Government and Financial Accountability. It's COGV. It's a number. It's a nonpartisan arm of our government that has economists, right? And they predicted 8 out of the 10 last budgets. And they looked at 15 years of the state's economic growth, and they determined that they project about 3.1% growth. Historically, the state of Illinois' economy has grown by 3.5%. So they completely, in a conservative way, our number, it underestimates that. Underestimates growth. It has very conservative growth. So, and it's COGVA's number, and in looking at that, we expect 34.2, and in fact, they just recently issued another look-at statement and said they expect us to get to that number of 34.2. So we expect that this to be addressed with some of the projected revenues that that are going to come in.
You mentioned a couple of times that anything that comes in that you haven't yet allocated is going to go towards some programs that have been funded. What happened to the stuff that I was hearing earlier in the session that's going to go to pay down past due bills?
What happens to, what do you mean?
I mean, it seems like the talk has turned from paying down past due bills to funding some of these organizations.
No. I mean, the talk, it's a combination of the two. Keep in mind, we've never deviated from that in the beginning. How do we fund the programs that we're supposed to fund, these services, while also paying our bills? The projected revenue that we had always was focusing on balancing the state budget, always. Any other additional revenue that we have go towards paying the bills. So we've always focused on that, a combination of the two. It's not to the exclusion of something else. Okay?
Thanks a lot, Senator.